Recently, there's been some, let's call it Christian relationship drama, or discourse on Twitter. Essentially, arguments over which kind of woman you should or shouldn't marry, plus Bible quotes. The tinder for these fiery debates appears to have been this post by Tom Buck. If someone argues that a former promiscuous woman is damaged goods and questions whether a Christian young man should marry her, remember Rahab. She was a Canaanite prostitute, but became a mother in the lineage of Jesus. God redeemed her, cleansed her, and Salmon married her. And then the spark that set everything aflame was a quote tweet of this. Trevor Sheets begins his response with the incredible line, "My wife was formerly promiscuous. I was a virgin." He says she'd been born again. They spent a long time getting to know each other and didn't do anything together in that time. Their first kiss was on their wedding. They've been married for years. They have multiple kids. He flexes his wife's purity, saying she's more pure than most virgins according to the Bible. I'm not a Christoid, I can't verify. Uses the Bible to flex more about how much better she is. She was forgiven more and therefore can love Jesus more. Again, not a Christoid, but I have my doubts you're supposed to be using that for rhetoric like this. He ends by saying someone's past matters, but what's more important is that they're truly born again. And shares a picture of him and his wife on their wedding day. And this has sparked off what I would call your typical internet body count discourse, plus Bible. Nothing you haven't seen before. And normally just pure torture to get involved with or look at all. But something I noticed was a lot of assumptions were being made on both sides regarding Trevor's wife, Ashley. For specific instance, I saw people using memes of, a party girl with a 30 body count, realizing her youth's draining away, wants to settle down, so clings onto the Bible. And I think that epitomizes the arguing I've seen. A woman who slept around versus one who wouldn't. Which one would you prefer? There's the more religious angle. How can you trust someone's really been reborn? And if they have, isn't that what should count? Like I said, all the greatest hits. You've seen it a million times, just sometimes with a religious flavor to it. With a sprinkling on top of all that aside, you're promoting this as the way to be. The hot thing is to have done all this and turned away from it. Isn't that a messed up example? Which I tend to agree with. Even from a non-religious perspective, I think you have to be careful about that. If that's the optimal strat to succeed, you kinda are incentivizing doing the stuff in the first place. Tricky. Like I said though, overall, really cookie-cutter, used-up woman put on a pedestal discourse. With very little of it, there is some, but not much, relating specifically to her, even though her marriage is why it's being talked about. Which I find a little strange, because Ashley's testimony, her story of what her life was like before she was saved, is public, and there's a fair amount of detail to it. I think if people took the time to look, the conversation here would be very different. So Ashley got involved in new age hippie stuff. Through that, she met a bunch of sketchy people who got her into drugs and would take advantage of her sexually. Well, what does that change, you're probably thinking? Yeah, it does sound kinda like a cope for being a whore. Yeah, it does. There are a million stories like this. But there's one more detail that I think matters quite a bit and is a bit of a blank that people have been filling in for themselves, even if not saying it explicitly. So let me ask you a question. How old do you think she was when this was going on? If you answered any number over 18, you're wrong. She says she started going down that path at about 15.
So it really started when I was about 15 years old. I remember when I first got into New Age, which New Age people don't call it New Age, but I went into Barnes and Noble and I was just instantly drawn to meditation.
About 15, goes to a bookstore, gets sucked in by Eastern spirituality. Okay, she says about 15, but we'll just call it 15. So the other question is, when did this end? In this interview with Doreen Virtue I've just shown you a clip from, a vague time frame for the worst of it is given.
That happened when I was about 16 to 18 years old. I got really addicted to drugs and I was just living a life of promiscuity and so lost. I was hiding things from my parents.
We also have a specific claim of when she was saved, when she embraced Jesus. This is brought up because they were asked about how and when they met, and it's related.
That's right. The friend who led me to the Lord, he took me to the same church that Trevor was at.
Oh, what a good friend he is.
Yes, he is. He discipled her. Not only shared the gospel, actually got her plugged into church too. So that's where we met in December that she was saved, 2017.
Okay, they met in December 2017, which was also when she was saved. For those unaware, Ashley herself is an influencer, and she has made her age and date of birth public. On October 18th, 2023, she posted that she was 24 years old and that her birthday is on December 29th. This means that if she was saved in December of 2017, she was either just 19 or 18 just about to turn 19. And that very Instagram post where she mentions her age stays consistent with that. Says she's been saved for almost 6 years, in October of 2023. Most of it occurred before she was even 18, and she stopped at 18. I don't really get why her husband was happy to paint her as a slut, when to me it looks a bit more like she was preyed upon, and as she said, by much older men.
My mom perceived me to be this angel who wouldn't tell lies because I was her baby, but I was able to sneak out. I was having boyfriends who were way older than me at the time, even when I was younger than 18, and I would just run away with them and camp out in these desert gatherings.
Definitely sounds to me like she was both preyed upon by creeps and failed by the person who was meant to be looking out for her. It should be noted, however, that in an interview with Ray Comfort earlier today, Ashley herself said she does not see herself as a victim.
I was a culprit. I was not a victim, and I want to make that clear.
An example of something that occurred that she included in her testimony that was published on Tumblr was that as a totally scrambled 17-year-old, a 50-year-old man plied her with drugs, did horrible things to her, and tried to brainwash her into his cult. I just think, because she's made it so public already, and said she's happy for all this to be talked about, it should be made clear that when she's talked about as formerly promiscuous, we're talking about a woman who as a girl suffered terribly from extreme parental negligence and became promiscuous at 15, while also smoking, drinking, and partying. It's unclear if at that time it was with peers or also with older people. I think in their ignorance of details, even her advocates on Twitter are being a bit unfair. She's being talked about like a party girl who started reaching 30 and realized, uh-oh, when actually this is someone who as a kid didn't stand a fucking chance. Off to a rough start from a young age. By 15, things were going pretty badly. Got pushed to do party drugs at 16. Then at 17, an older boyfriend introduced her to LSD, mushrooms, DMT, and more. She got her shit fried, saying she suffered memory loss and psychosis. She then even got hooked on ketamine. Now, would I recommend going to find a woman like this to become your lifetime partner and wife? No. In fact, I would actively suggest not doing that. However, I don't think the cookie-cutter reformed whore discourse actually applies here. I really do think her husband's vagueness, merely describing her as formerly promiscuous, while quote-tweeting a guy talking about a biblical whore, painted a certain picture with plenty of gaps for people to fill in themselves in their mind. And that's led the conversation down a course that ain't quite right. Something else I want to note is, another YouTuber on here, Remnant, was tweeting about how, when you see e-girls defending this really heavily, they're really defending themselves. I think he's going to be right in a lot of cases, but I think you can go further. I think it should be pointed out that their story ain't Ashley's story. Christian grift pivot e-girls are a little bit different to a woman who had a wretched childhood and fixed things when she was 18, in my eyes at least. Now, Ashley does say she did do some cam whoring when she was 18, briefly, but again, I think it's worth considering that that's all on the tail end of drug addictions she picked up as a minor. I'll emphasize again, this is just stuff that's happening in the Christian community online. I'm not a Christian and I wouldn't personally date someone like this. I'm not really on your side, and I'm not part of your faith, but good on you kicking that shit to the curb before you even turn 19. Or let me put it this way. If her story's true, and even though it's now being used as some sort of fucking disgusting, vile social media attention strategy, anyway, if her story's true, she really does sound like someone who got caught up in something young, quickly realized how wrong it was, and kicked it to the curb. Nice one. A friend like that, I'd be proud of. Or, like if I heard someone I went to school with who got caught up in all that, got out of it. It's good to hear. Doesn't change how much of an obvious risk it is to tie your life to that person. And her husband really brought the response on themselves the way they're presenting it on social media. They do look like absolute deranged freaks. That first sentence alone is a doozy. But knowing the full details, it just rubbed me the wrong way a bit, how this is being discussed. I figured I'd point it out to people. Anyway, till next time, take it easy.